Hi, my name is Leslie Cherebesi, and this is part 2 of a 6-part series on the question of how Islam became political. Now, you will recall that in the previous video, the first video in the series, we have zeroed in on the first stage in this process of the transformation of Islam as a religion of peace into political Islam or Islamism. And in this video, we have explored the reasons why there was what we have described as the repression of reason, why this has taken place, and what were some of the consequences of this development. Now, you will recall that we touched on in the first video on the question of how there arose two camps in early Islam on the question of what was the best or the right way to interpret the revelation of the Quran. On the one hand, we had the traditionists, the so-called Ahlul Hadith, and on the other hand, we had the rationalists, or the so-called Ahlul Al-Ra'i, or the people of opinion. These people of opinion are also known as the people of reason or the rationalists. So now the traditionists argued that the best way to understand revelation was by recourse to tradition, while the rationalists argued that the use of reason was more suitable for the understanding of revelation. Now, the whole issue arose partly in response to what we have termed as the repression of reason, or the subordination of reason to tradition. As a result of this marginalization of reason, what happened in exegesis was that the exegetes began to encounter passages in the Qur'an that struck them as ambiguous and even as contradictory. So now, in order to address this problem of this challenge of the presence of what they believed were ambiguous and contradictory verses in the Quran, the exegetes reached out not so much to reason anymore. After all, they condemned it as a form of disbelief when used in the comprehension of revelation, but rather they reached out to tradition in order to help them to explain the allegedly ambiguous passages of revelation. But in order to engage tradition, in order to explain revelation, they first had to take a very important step in light of three verses in chapter 5 of the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, according to which anyone who judges by what Allah has not revealed is a zalim, a wrongdoer, a kafir, a disbeliever, and a fasik or a rebel. So, insofar as the explanation of revelation by a reference to tradition requires judging, so to speak, a revelation by tradition, revelation could not be judged by tradition if tradition was deemed to be something that was not revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is for this reason that the traditionists felt obliged or felt it necessary to elevate tradition to the rank of revelation. They did it in order to enable tradition to actually be used in the process of clarifying revelation. So they did this basically by introducing the concept of dual revelation, known as the wahyayn in Arabic, according to which there were actually two revelations, the manifest revelation of the Quran and the second revelation, which they called wahi batin, which roughly translates into hidden revelation. And this allegedly hidden, although some people use the term internal revelation, this second revelation was none other but the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be on him. And in order to facilitate the acceptance of the Sunnah to explain revelation, the revelation of the Quran, some of the exegetes or jurists went so far as to assert that the term hikmah in the Quran actually refers to the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be on him. So this was essentially the step that they had to take in order to make it possible and acceptable for tradition to be used to explain revelation. Now, this practice of explaining revelation by recourse to tradition, as we will see in the next video, was in fact expressed in statements such as the Quran needs the Sunnah more than the Sunnah needs the Quran, and also the process of judging revelation by tradition, which we will explore in the next video. This process of judging revelation or explaining revelation by tradition was also justified by the popular saying, popular among the exegetes and the jurists, according to which the as-sunnah qadiya ala Quran, that is the Arabic, which means that the Sunnah judges the Quran. So basically, this was the development that has happened in the second stage of this process of the gradual transformation of Islam as a religion of peace into something more political, or what we have also termed as Islamism. However, this step of elevating tradition to the rank of revelation was not without problems. Among the biggest problems is that the alleged equality of revelation, of tradition and revelation, presents a certain challenge to tauhid, or the doctrine of monotheism, because it seems to imply that there is some kind of a second source of revelation in addition to the Quran, the source that produced the Quran, which of course is believed to be Allah or God in Islam. So the elevation of tradition to the rank of revelation, or the second revelation, appears to imply that there is a second source that revealed the traditions. So we may legitimately ask if the Quran was revealed by Allah, who then revealed the traditions? Clearly, it was not God who revealed the traditions, because the traditions are not the words of Allah. In fact, there's even a problem stating that it was the Prophet who revealed the traditions, because the traditions are not, in fact, not even the words of the Prophet. The traditions are in fact the words of transmitters, and these words are in fact paraphrases. They are not verbatim or the exact words of the Prophet as they were spoken by him. So it is difficult to say that the traditions actually represent the verbatim words of the Prophet. So we cannot really say that the Prophet revealed the tradition either, because after all, he was a prophet, and revelation is something that is a prerogative of God. But if God or Allah did not reveal these traditions, then who did? Well, that only leaves the compilers of tradition, Bukhari, Muslim, Nasai, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, and I believe there is one more, Ahmad. So, can we conclude that it was these individuals that revealed the traditions? I will leave it up to the viewers to decide for themselves these questions. I'm merely pointing to the implications of the assumption or the claim that the traditions constitute a secondary revelation. Now, in order to buttress the case that the traditions constitute a second form of revelation, the traditionists have actually come up with a hadith, or a tradition, according to which the Prophet allegedly said that I was given two things, the Quran and something else equal to it, and that is the hadith. Now, this quotation may be found online, and also it is included in on the official Saudi website, which conducts research into matters relating to Islam. The same tradition appears sometimes is rendered in a slightly different way, and it says in this alternatively the tradition says that the Prophet said or allegedly said that I was given two things, the Quran and something like it. The word like it, and that is the hadith, the word like it instead of equal to it is used in this particular alternative rendition of that particular hadith. So, however that may be, we need to remember that from the Quranic perspective, there is nothing like the Quran. The Quran is considered to be perfect, complete, detailed, and inimitable. In other words, it cannot be replicated. Unlike the traditions which have been fabricated on an epic scale, in fact, and the vast majority of the hadiths, for example, collected by Bukhari, and there were approximately 600,000 of them, were rejected by him as spurious or lacking in authenticity or having some other kind of weakness. So out of the 600,000 hadiths that he actually collected, he only retained about 1%, perhaps slightly more, of the hadiths which he classified as authentic. In other words, he rejected almost 99% of all the hadiths that he collected. So this shows that the extent to which the hadiths were fabricated was actually quite substantial. And we could perhaps also remind the viewers that one of the contemporary Muslim commentators, Taha Jabir al-Wani, stated in his book called Reviving the Balance, which was published by IIIT in 2017. In that book, he stated that any hadith that contradicts the Quran should be automatically considered to have been fabricated. So now that rules out several hadiths, but perhaps we can discuss that question on a more suitable occasion. For the time being, perhaps we can simply reiterate that the elevation of tradition to revelation was a highly problematic step because it seems to have challenged the doctrine of tauhid or monotheism. And for that reason, I believe this principle that the ahadith constitute a secondary form of revelation needs to be re-examined and reassessed, and if necessary, set aside, because it is quite clear that Quran claims and in fact challenges us to produce something similar, and it challenges us in particular to produce 10 surahs like the surahs we find in the Quran. And if we are not able to produce 10 surahs, it challenges us to produce at least one surah that is similar to any surah in the Quran. And of course, to my knowledge, no one has so far succeeded in meeting this challenge. So we can also add that if we really consider Allah or God unique and unlike anyone else, how can his words have anything be similar? How can the words of a narrator be in any sense equal to the words of God or even like the words of God? So clearly, it seems to me that if God has no equals, his words would have no equals either. So once again, these are some of the reasons why this assumption or claim that the traditions constitute a secondary revelation need to be reviewed, reassessed, and if necessary, set aside. We need, in other words, to maintain the supremacy of revelation over tradition at all times, and we need to find a methodology of studying revelation and also applying exegesis and jurisprudence in a way that never compromises the sovereignty of revelation or the sovereignty of God, because it seems to me that if we begin to equate tradition with revelation, we may be guilty of a lapse into polytheism or associating a partner with God, and that clearly is forbidden in the Quran, and in fact is considered to be the biggest sin in Islam. So we'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the speaking to you in the next video, which will be on a topic of how tradition was elevated even above revelation to be a judge of revelation, for the purpose of the clarification of the allegedly ambiguous verses in the Quran. Thank you very much.